I'm Mike Albu. I look after the Beam Exchange. We're a platform for sharing information and knowledge and experience about programs that use the market systems development approach. And one of the things we do is provide this space for organizations to showcase their work, their experiences, their lessons, and get a bit of discussion going. We call it the Grab the Mic webinar. And if your organization would like to be represented in one of these, please get in touch with us through the website and our webinar page on the website, and let us know what you'd like to talk about, and we'll consider you for our pipeline of webinars in future. To introduce two speakers today, called Mark Thomas, who's the Senior Vice President of Nathan Associates, and his colleague Camila Studart, who is the Senior Program Manager. And they've both been very involved in this program in Ghana that they're going to talk about today, the Ghana MAID program. And they're going to talk about key experiences and lessons from that, all around how you can help agribusinesses to grow and overcome market failures. So without any further to do, I think I'll go over to hand the mic over to them, as it were, and let them do the talking. Mark, I think, is going to start.
Thanks, Mike, and good day to everybody from wherever you are. It's great that you came to join us, and thanks a lot for doing so. I'm talking about this program that was in Ghana for 7 years, funded by the UK government as an MSD program. I'm going to highlight what we're really highlighting in this discussion is an approach focused on agribusinesses, as opposed to perhaps what many MSD programs in agriculture do, focusing on a particular issue like seeds or a particular market failure, and how we developed this approach and learned along the way in Ghana to come to something quite successful at the end. And I'd like to emphasize from the start that we weren't brilliant enough to work out this approach before we started, and it was very much an iterative learning process that got us there in the end. So I'd like to highlight that. So just to give a little bit of context and set the scene, the program was in northern Ghana, and northern Ghana is quite a dry area with rain-fed agriculture. And it's not untypical for many parts of sub-Saharan Africa. There are, plenty of market failures. It's one of those situations where you see all the issues and you can list the problems very easily. And it's a question of, trying to think how we're going to tackle them. So we're talking about almost an entirely a smallholder system. Most of these smallholders being primarily subsistence, poorly connected to markets, poorly serviced by input providers, both in terms of physical inputs and services. Very limited support from the government, weak extension services, very little R&D going on, infrastructure issues around power and roads and so on. So stuff that we're probably quite familiar with in many contexts. But there are many small SME agribusinesses in that ecosystem, which is perhaps slightly different from some other places. Next slide, please, Camilla. So in terms of the case, if we go back those 7 years, what was the case for the program? I think the first thing to stress is that there were clearly opportunities for agricultural transformation in the north of Ghana. There's huge potential. So that's an important thing, that was there. And that because of these agribusinesses, we always recognized that these would be key partners for us. We didn't, as I said, realize quite how we were going to engage with them and make it work. But we started as a value chain, with a value chain approach, which we changed after a few years. But it was always clear that we were not going to be working directly with farmers, and we didn't work at all with farmers. And many programs at that time in northern Ghana were working with farmers more on the traditional sort of support to production. next slide, please. That's over to you, Camila.
Yeah. So as Mark mentioned, we didn't have a blueprint when we started the Ganymede program. So looking back now, we're able to clearly identify these 3 different phases of Ganymede, very distinct phases with different scopes and priorities. When we started the program, it was supposed to be a 4-year program, and we ended up with a 7-year program with a much larger scope, with a lot of different areas that were covered. And this is not something that we could have predicted when we started the program, but through following a market systems approach, working in collaboration with our agribusiness partners, as well as having support from the government of the UK, as well as Ghana, we were able to have this very successful program in 3 different phases. I know some people that have worked on MADE throughout the years are in this call, and they might not recognize all 3 phases, but have helped us through the different phases. So how did we do this? So as Mark mentioned, we worked with the agribusinesses. We received funds from the UK government. Nathan implements the program, and we worked with agribusinesses in northern Ghana, who they themselves have their staff members, they have their extension agents, and they work with the farmers. The farmers are the clients of the agribusinesses. So we did a lot of the business side of the work with the agribusinesses we worked with. And we tried to follow the annual cycle of the businesses. We didn't impose a timeline that worked for us based on our funding cycle. We wanted it to work with what they were doing. We engaged with them once a year to create a business plan for what they were going to accomplish that year. And when we started this, it was very, very difficult to get this process done quickly. It used to take us about 6 months to come up with the work plan and budget for the businesses for the year. But as we developed the program, as we implemented, the businesses started to really understand this mechanism of planning. And at the end, we're able to do it with less than a month of the annual cycle starting. So what are the high-level MADE numbers? So here are some numbers for you to kind of see the bigger picture. Over the 7 years of the program, we worked with 114 agribusinesses. Every year the number changed. Some year, the first year was about 4 agribusinesses, the last year about 20, 1 year we had 64, and some of them accompanied us from year 1 to year 7. Some of them came for a year or 2. So it really depended on what the agribusiness needed, the level of engagement required, and what we could provide them in regards to support. Overall, the program reached 139,000 smallholder farmers, 43% of them being women, which is really interesting because actually in the original business case, we had a 15% target for women reached. And we also had a 60.7 million investment from the private sector. So obviously these are just numbers. So I wanted to showcase a face, put a face to the names here. Antika is one of the agribusinesses that worked with us from day 1. They worked with Ganymede in partnership throughout all 7 years, and they benefited immensely from it. I have here some numbers for both 2015 to 2018 in regards to smallholder farmer outreach, and you can see it more than doubled between that time period. But if you go on our Ganymede website, you can see the 2020 figures, and I believe they doubled twice over again. So Antika is one of the agribusinesses that we worked with and really benefited from the program. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Camila. So, this slide, I've called it the 4 pillars, and I think, this is the kind of nitty-gritty of the program as it evolved and where it ended up. On the left, you see here defining, building, and showcasing what we call the advanced business model, and I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail on the next slide. But this was what the businesses were learning and helping us to learn as to how to grow their businesses through growing the productivity and area of their farmers and making it a win-win. And this is the absolute sort of central result of the program, and that's why I'm going to speak to it a bit more. But alongside developing that, you had a whole initiative to help those businesses actually do it. And that involves things like digitalizing the farmer records they have and building their capacity to manage their businesses in other ways. Because one thing to have the ideas and the model is another one to deliver the model. And then another key thing for us was, to make the case beyond our immediate agribusinesses for why this working with the private sector was a good thing to do and why it could deliver development outcomes, development benefits. And that, might sound obvious, but, many organizations are still suspicious of the private sector and prefer to work in other ways. So we had a role to take this beyond, because we don't want this just to be limited to our own engagement with, albeit quite a large number of companies. And then the fourth pillar was addressing issues of gender stereotypes and mobilizing the youth within this business model and challenging some of the kind of cultural norms in northern Ghana. And Camila is going to talk a bit more about how we did that, again, as a win-win for the businesses and not as a sort of add-on. So next slide, please, Camila. So this is this is really about the advanced business model. And it took us a long time to get to this model with these companies, especially the sort of full premium package. But the essence of it is that you have to tackle more than one issue at a time if you want to help these growers really move the needle on their productivity. And we had developed this, you probably can't really see it, but it's called we called it the 7 rights of farmers. It's about, getting the right inputs on the right quality at the right time, delivered in the right way, and so on. And giving the message really both to the agribusinesses and the farmers that, you need to tackle all of these things together if you're going to get a good result. And any one of those things, late inputs, which we're all familiar with on so many situations, or the lack of off-taker, one thing can spoil everything. So this was what the agribusinesses bought into, that they're going to try and make sure that the farmers get all these things in the right way. And then to do that, certain elements became essential for that business model. One of these was farm advisory services. We found that these businesses needed to invest in field staff and get them out there to engage regularly with their growers. And that became an absolutely essential part of the model and was embraced by these businesses. And the support we gave them in terms of financial support was only to help with the logistics costs of mobilizing these field staff. We didn't do, there were no other grants or anything significant more than that in terms of the help, and they had to pay the salaries and so on. But that was key. Another key element was what we call commercial partnerships, was the realization that these businesses couldn't quickly take on the delivery of this full package of services to their growers on their own often, and they began to team up with other businesses, other agribusinesses, and that worked very well. So this was a way of accelerating the pace at which they could achieve these things. And then aggregation was key, is these businesses, the farmers need to be sure of their market, and the aggregation linked to the supply of the input services is obviously an element that was crucial to farmers in that they were getting most of these, or quite a lot of these inputs on credit from the agribusinesses on the condition that they sold back to them. And we evolved this bundle of services over time to what we call the basic, medium, and premium. And by the end, you couldn't participate on the MAID program unless you were prepared to offer at least the basic bundle of packages, basic bundle package, which include land preparation, seeds, fertilizer and so on, and the extension advisory services and the buyback. And this became the minimum, because without any one of those things, then your chances of succeeding were very low. And then as you got to the more fancy packages, you could do even more. So I'm going to stop there on that and hand back to Camila.
And just to add, what we noticed at the end of the program was actually that most businesses, if not all, were doing the premium bundle because they were working in collaboration through commercial partnerships with other businesses, either through connecting through MAID or by building that relationship with other agribusinesses. As Mark and I have pointed out a few times through this presentation, is that we didn't have a blueprint for the program, and we were really trying to be as adaptive and opportunistic as possible. We really followed what the agribusinesses were able to do and also pushed them as much as possible by promoting business cases. One of them, a really good example, I believe, is what we did in regards to challenging gender stereotypes and also mobilizing youth. So the program had a very small target of women beneficiaries when it was first set up. It was 15%. And through the first phase, we realized that actually the agribusinesses had a lot more desire to work with female farmers for various reasons that we can discuss if you want, but also there's a lot of resource on our website if you want to read more on that. But what's interesting is that allowed us to then push the envelope in our targets and also in the way we were thinking about engaging with women and youth. So as we were developing the second phase of the program, we realized that even though the businesses were keen to work with women at the smallholder farmer level, we would see them less and less as we went up the value chain. So the businesses had employees, less than 11% of them were women, and the business owners, less than 2% of them were women. So we wanted to understand this more and see if there's an opportunity there for us to make some change or have an impact. We did a complex gender assessment and spoke to some young women in the agricultural sector. You can see them here on the picture. We went to some agricultural colleges in northern Ghana. The women in this picture are from the Demongo College. And we tried to understand the possibilities of working with more young women in our program. We identified that actually a lot of the barriers for entry as staff members for the agribusinesses were just cultural barriers and misunderstandings from the businesses on how to really engage these young women and retain them. So we developed a pilot, an internship pilot, that would allow us to connect young women and also young men as well, to the businesses. Even though there were more than 300 applicants, less than 25% of the applicants for the internship scheme were women, but we decided to have 15 men and 15 women to really promote the gender element of this internship scheme. We had some low expectations for this pilot because it was something new that hadn't been really done. We thought that maybe out of the 30 interns, potentially maybe 5 or 6 would have an opportunity to have a role with the businesses after the pilot. But what we found out is that the pilot was extremely successful in breaking some of these norms and behavior patterns. Out of the 30 interns, 22 of them received some form of engagement after the internship scheme. You can see here that actually the part-time has more women than men. And this is actually really positive because out of the 30 interns, 15 were women and 10 of those women were young mothers. So they preferred to have some flexible arrangements. And when they started working with the agribusinesses that worked with them saw the benefit of having the young women work for them and wanted to work with them to identify a way that it would work within their schedule and other priorities in their home. So we were able to facilitate those discussions and help the businesses find solutions with the young women. So overall, it was a very successful pilot, and it actually has now been picked up as an idea by the government of something that they would like to build up on. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Camila. So just very quickly on sort of some key lessons learned, and these are more about, I mentioned first on the process lesson was, of course, that we were given the flexibility and more time to get to where we got to, and this is a common learning from M4P or MSD programs, that you need that flexibility, and we were given that, and that's important. In terms of the actual program, I think the advanced business model is an absolutely key lesson, and that's importance of the holistic approach to addressing the issues that were there between production and the market. By using the agribusinesses, we were able to tackle, maybe not completely, or maybe not in a fully ideal way, but many systemic failures at the same time. And even some of those agribusinesses essentially taking on some of the roles that you might more associate as a public good. In terms of agents of change, I think we were right to focus on the agribusinesses, and you had that win-win element to it, that they want to grow their businesses, they want to achieve that through better procurement from smallholders, and smallholders, therefore, if smallholders become more productive and produce more, it's the win-win. The commercial partnerships was a learning, that just came out. We didn't anticipate that. In a way, it evolved from the mechanization side, because mechanization is an absolutely key element here if you're going to really make a step change in productivity. And it's difficult to mobilize mechanization in northern Ghana, and there are companies though who specialize in tractor services, and that was an example of good commercial partnerships. And sometimes some of the firms, agribusinesses, were more on the aggregator side, and some were more on the input supply side. So if you could get them working together, that was obviously a win. And then I think on the inclusion side, as Camila just explained, it was showing people how this could be a win-win for everybody, and opening people's eyes, opening up opportunities, and that was very successful. So that's just, in a way, that's just a few highlights on lessons. Next slide, please, Camila. Looking forward for northern Ghana, we're not saying that working with agribusinesses solves all the market failures and everything is going to be all right. Of course, there's lots of other things that need to be tackled, and here's a list of some of them. And you can see how, if we continued, some of these can be further tackled by working with agribusinesses, but you also need, obviously, to bring in other stakeholders and other stages of the value chain and so on. So we're not saying that agribusiness is a solution to everything, and of course agribusinesses don't exist everywhere in the kind of level that you can work with in other places. So these are the things that emerge from MAID as very important, and some of these we had tackled. We did other things in MAID as well as just the agribusiness stuff, but I just want to highlight that there's plenty more things to tackle to really transform northern Ghana. And I think we're just about up to our half an hour, so I'll just refer you to especially that website at the bottom, which I think Isabella's put in the chat. We have on that website there all the resources collected together that are most useful from the program. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Camilla. That was great. Thank you for keeping to time and some very easy to understand slides and very clear explanations. Yeah, just as Mark mentioned, there are some links in the chat box, which Isabel's putting there for you. So if you want to explore them or just click on them so you can bookmark them, please do that while we talk and while we present the questions. So we have a really decent half an hour for Q&A, and we've already got quite a few questions coming in. So I'm hoping that we're going to have quite a nice little debate here. So please continue adding questions to the Q&A box if you want to, and we'll keep on trying to address them either in Word or in typing. Let me start with a fairly simple question, but I think really crucial question. To me, it speaks to the whole notion of what the market systems development approach is about. And it's actually, I don't know who posted it, they wanted to be anonymous, but the question is, did you have, or could you explain a bit more about the exit strategy for these partnerships you had with these firms or these businesses that you supported in some cases for right through for 7 years, and in other cases for less time? Are you tracking how they have done, how they're performing now since you stopped working with them or supporting them? In other words, is there a danger here that you created some dependency on the program?
I can kick off, Mark, and if you want to jump in, that's a really great question. Sustainability and exit for us has always been an underlying discussion in everything we do, and it's key, as you say, Mike, to my market systems development. The interesting thing about our model is that when we were doing the business plans, we didn't just plan May's contribution, we helped the businesses plan for their entire year. And sometimes we also looked and helped them look 4 or 5 years beyond the program. So we helped them map out what were they trying to achieve, what was their growth strategy. We gave them advice, we gave them technical support to understand how they would get there. And we would then look at what we were able to financially support them with. So budget-wise, we never provided them with more than 4% of their annual budget. So very small, really, contribution from our program. We were providing more of that technical support. We were providing them with some risk safety nets. So we would say, hey, do you want to try this internship scheme? They would come back and say, that sounds really risky. We've never done it. We would say, okay, we will fund the operational cost of it for a month. If it works, you can then see if you want to hire them. So we were really just helping to catalyze change by promoting new ideas and creating that safety net for it. So in the end of the day, we could see the progress of it beyond us. And you could see that in our numbers. So as Mark mentioned, a key element of our model was our FEA, our extension services. Sometimes we would only pay for their operational cost, but the business would have to pay their salary. And as we were exiting, we would notice the number of FEAs that continued to be employed by the businesses. So Antika, for instance, still has 18 FEAs that they have full-time hired. So that showcases to you that we were overall thinking about the sustainability element. Mark, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think in terms of exit strategy, each one of these businesses had no commitment from us beyond 1 year, but beyond the current season. And then if they wanted to continue the next year, they'd have to go through the process. And as Camilla said, we're not making a substantial contribution to their budget. So, I felt quite comfortable that when we left, that they would carry on if they wished to, and most of them would carry on expanding. I mean, unfortunately, as is the way of these things, we're not in a position to be up there in northern Ghana monitoring closely what happens to them. I mean, we hear through the grapevine, but no, we don't. That's the way these programs work.
Interesting observation, Mark. One that's close to my heart, since we've just been looking at a review of the evidence from these programs and the limited amount of follow-up that happens often. But anyway, that's probably a conversation for a different day. Lots of questions are coming in. Some of them are quite short and to the point, and others are a little bit more involved. Let's cover. And by the way, there's a couple of people who've put questions into the chat box. So please, if you could cut and paste them or retype them into the Q&A box, it makes my life much easier, because that's the bit of the screen I'm looking at. What questions are coming really there. So Sanya Wandero asked what size are the businesses in terms of turnover or number of employees that you typically work with. But I think a couple of other people have actually asked more wider questions than that, which is, in a sense, how did you select which businesses to work with? What was the process, the criteria you used, or the process of selecting them?
You want to take that one, Camilla? The annual
process was, and I mean, I wasn't there from the beginning, I must say, Mark was, but from what I understand, in the beginning, it was quite difficult to actually identify the businesses. So we really had to do a lot of looking for potential businesses, and they were very small. We're talking about very small outreach, maybe 1,000 farmers that they work with, potentially 1 staff or 2 staff members, nothing formal. As the program evolved, there was more and more desire for agribusinesses to work with us. In the last year, we received over 400 applications, and we only accepted, I believe, 36 in the last year. It's been a while, so I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But anyways, the process of selection was a request for proposal. We opened it up to everyone, past and potential businesses that wanted to work with us. And it was a very lengthy process of looking through their work plans, what they wanted to do, if they would benefit from our model, because we didn't want to just get businesses that didn't really believe in the MAID model. So it was a lengthy process, and overall it evolved every single year. But again, we have resources on this. We wrote quite a lot of lessons learned on this topic, and you can access it on our website.
So I'll just add that, yeah, I mean, we did before we got to, where we were running so smoothly towards the last phase, we did all sorts of other things to try and support businesses. We had an accelerator. We had various efforts to provide BDS services to the businesses. And it took a while to, find the best approach. And as we were more established and people learned word of mouth and so on, yes, by the end, the businesses were looking for joining the program, whereas at the beginning you're looking for businesses to engage with. In terms of turnover, I mean, there's quite a big range. The largest businesses probably have a turnover of 5 or 6 million, I would think, and the smaller ones much less. And we did move towards slightly bigger businesses towards the latter stages of the program to get more bang for your buck, if you like, in terms of their capacity and ability to reach more farmers.
And I think someone asked a question around the investment. This is the firm level investment. So we counted what they were contributing, the businesses. As I mentioned, we contributed about less than 5%, less than 4%, I believe, to the business plan. So everything else was really just the business's money. And that's what we counted as a £60.7 million investment from the private sector.
And do you have a figure, a sort of rounded up figure for income growth for these businesses overall?
We do, but not off the top of my head. I do have the value for income growth of the farmers. That was £1,400 a year of income growth at the end of the program for each farmer.
What's that as a percentage of their baseline? Any idea?
The baseline was done in phase 2, and we were hoping for £400 of increase per farmer. So that was a significant growth.
Okay. you might have covered this already, but I just thought it was quite interesting. There's a question from Tertia Bailey at FCDO. There was also a question from someone asking which part of the UK government funded the programme. It was obviously FCDO, UK aid, but I mean, perhaps you could explain the funding, the specific funding channel that paid for Ghana Made. But Tertia Bailey asking whether there were links to other agri-support programmes, presumably other donor-funded agri-support programmes in Ghana.
Yeah, I can take that one. So yes, it was funded by FCDO out of the Ghana FCDO allocation. The links with other programs, yes, there were quite a number of other programs going on in northern Ghana and in wider in Ghana, and the links were done through a kind of project level, and then there were events that were there were annual fairs and agricultural fairs that were kind of co-financed partly by us, partly by other programs. There was initially there was such a divide in the methodology and approach at the beginning, particularly between our program and many of the other programs, that the engagement was more difficult. But gradually that improved, and there was a big USAID program in Ghana as well, which was not exactly aligned, but following a more similar approach. And there were also other things going on in Ghana, like the government program for food and jobs, which involved heavily subsidized inputs going into the country. But luckily, the inputs were delivered through agribusinesses. So all of our agribusinesses, whether they're working with us or with other programs, became involved as well in working with the Ghanaian government. So that was another area that brought sort of common purpose, if you like, across different programs as to how to deal with that without the risk of it undermining all of the efforts that you were making to establish these systems.
And that was an absolute pivotal part of phase 3 in the program. We had to just understand that our scope there's a lot of overlap in scopes from donors, from implementers. So we really just had to come together. So we did a lot of sitting down at the table with other programs to really understand where we could collaborate, where we were overlapping, and how we could respond to that. I think someone asked a question about attribution, especially seeing the crowded market of funding in northern Ghana. We were extremely aware of this. So all of our calculations take this into consideration, but also our model is different from other programs. And we specifically counted the farmers that received the full bundle of packages. So for instance, Antika, we are only counting, Antika worked with hundreds of thousands of farmers indirectly, but we were counting the 15,000 that received the full bundle. And we have some literature on this, on how actually the farmers were better off that received the full bundle. If they didn't, we didn't see it as a full growth for the farmers themselves. So we were really promoting this bundle service, and that's what we were really counting from the partners.
Fascinating. So Mark, just to clarify, because there was a question from Gisela Roth. So you said you counted the investments by the businesses themselves, when you came up with this number of 60 million co-invested by those partners. Where would they have been getting that money from? And presumably some of that would just have been annual profits reinvested, but would they also have been borrowing money or getting financial credits elsewhere to invest in the collaboration?
Yes.
That's a access to finance question, which is hanging there. It's very challenging, and that's a big market failure for so many places, including northern Ghana, and a challenge for these businesses to find sufficient working capital to grow as fast as they would like. Now, these businesses had access to the banking system and were borrowing from the banks, but they had very limited lines of credit, if you like, because the banks saw them as quite high risk. So one of the things that enabled them to, I would say the two ways they managed to grow their businesses faster was one, as you say, Mike, they're reinvesting what they achieve each season. But the second one was, as they grew and the improvement in their systems and the way they kept records and had, far more reflective accounting systems and things, they were able to increase the line of credit they got from the banks. But we did not tackle the broader issue of finance. And in answer to Tertia's other question about turning MAID into a financially self-sufficient model, the provision of the services to farmers on a cost recovery is there. It's the businesses are doing that. So that's, that wasn't paid for by us beyond the small contribution to the logistics costs of the FEA. So that's there. The sustainability of providing the advice and the support to the agribusinesses is the issue. And although, as in, we always hope that there'll be uptake and replication and so on, which there will be, obviously, there are, as Camila said, there are thousands of agribusinesses, and they haven't all got the new model or moved to the model yet. So that element of it isn't financed anymore. And also, we've been hoping to spread it to the rest of the country and look at how you can go to the next level. But the actual farmer services is there. And, I would say, compared to the Government of Ghana Extension Service, it's a much better system.
And we have the numbers on that, actually. We have an FEA business case, which is available on our resource site, which actually compares the incentives and also the payments for the staff of businesses versus the government extension, and also what the farmers felt was more helpful. So I would really suggest reading that business case.
Okay, so this is such a great question, though, Mark. If you don't mind, if we can just dig into it a little bit more deeply, because what Tertia is actually asking is, would it have been possible, in principle, to turn MAID itself into a financially self-sufficient model? In other words, would the businesses have been willing to pay for the support services that you were providing them, and would the cost? I mean, would it have been affordable for them, given the benefits that they achieved, or is this essentially only possible through a donor-funded model, and therefore a temporary and time-bound and geographically bound response?
So, I mean, I guess a sort of yes. I think everybody who works a lot with SMEs knows how difficult it is to get SMEs to pay for services. I think that the businesses would potentially pay for it, but it'd be quite difficult to present what they were going to pay for over time. Essentially what they were getting was ideas and an annual planning process, support for an annual planning process, and separately they were getting some actual financial support for the logistics costs. I would say that so some of the individuals working for MAID, some of our team, could quite easily probably still get hired by some of those firms to help going forward, and if they set themselves up to do that. But to set up MAID as an institution, sort of Musica style, I think we're quite a long way away from that being a model that would easily work.
And we did try with one element of MAID in the final years of the program. We created M-Access, which is an app so that the agribusinesses could have their staff members, their FEAs, go out and digitally record their relationships with the farmers. And we also created Tonpas, which was essentially a receipt for digital receipt process. So we created 2 apps that we then worked with a local firm in Ghana to create. Then we shared this with agribusinesses, and we then launched it to market. So the company in Ghana now owns, FCDO has passed over the rights of these apps to this local company, and they have taken it to market. And any business in Ghana, I think they also launched this in Mozambique because it was very successful, can pay for this app service, and it is market driven. And some of the agribusinesses that we worked with under MAID saw the potential of using these apps and still use it to this day.
Fascinating. Okay, look, we are got a lot of questions. You're really generating a lot of interest here. A couple of questions related to something quite technical, practical, which is around land preparation, mechanization, tractors, and so on. Can you just go back and give us a quick sort of picture of what kind of mechanization services were involved in the package as land preparation? Did this mean, for example, providing tractors, or what? Yeah, just talk a little bit more about all of that kind of the land preparation and mechanization aspect of it.
So, you know, the number one thing is the ploughing services, and you know, farmers are. It's very interesting. There's such demand for that part was not pre-financed by the agribusinesses. So growers had to pay for that service, you know, upfront. So that was about coordination. There's essentially a shortage. It's very difficult. So the businesses, because the businesses had the relationship with the growers, they could facilitate the coordination of that service provision because they've got the field staff out there. So the company that has the tractors has a much easier job, because the business will say, okay, you go in that area, I have, you know, 150 farmers there ready to pay, and off you go. So that was one element to it. So it was a coordination function in a way that was being provided. And in Ghana, because, you know, there's a difference in the seasonality, you have tractors move from the south to the north when they finished in the south, and it's quite a complicated system. It goes beyond that because there was some threshing and harvesting, you know, much smaller scale, but that was being developed as well by some of the agribusinesses. What's interesting though is when you look at climate change, and when you're looking in the future, you know, Ghana, in my view, needs to move much more to a kind of conservation agriculture, low tillage system, and that hasn't really taken off yet. But it's beginning, and there are rippers available, for example, in Tamale now, and you can see how this mechanism can keep going and keep moving. And there's a question about agrochemicals and so on, and then you get into more complication, because of course, if a smallholder starts to cultivate, you know, 5 hectares where they only used to do 1, then, you know, the weeding challenge will come. And then if you've got to weed 5 hectares, you're not going to be able to do it by hand, whereas you used to be able to weed 1 hectare by hand. So then you're going to need to use weedicides to keep control, or something like that. So the system develops, and new challenges are thrown up, and it's a question of whether, you know, the agribusiness can meet these challenges. And of course there are risks then, because in this model, if an agribusiness is promoting and selling weedicides or other agrochemicals, then you're relying on them to also make sure that they're stored safely and used properly and so on. And that's part of our message to them through the field staff, is that they have to take that responsibility. But of course there are risks there. Yeah,
and on the mechanization part of it, it's actually quite interesting. I saw a question asking if we actually provided some of these, if we paid, and no, we did not. We really wanted to create something that we could use the existing system. So as Mark said, A lot of it was helping to bring some of the tractor services from the south to the north, connecting them to the businesses, but also identifying agribusinesses that own tractors to provide services as a offering to other businesses and their farmers. So actually Antika, the business that I mentioned, at first he was procuring services from the south, but then he realized that he had enough money. We helped him buy a tractor secondhand. Then he noticed that he could actually help a couple of other businesses with tractor services. So he was providing business to other agribusinesses with those services. And now he has about 12 tractors. So actually the other businesses, when we spoke to them, like Wumpini, the owner would say, well, I don't need to buy a tractor because I can just procure the services for my farmers from Antika. So that's just a sustainable model. And it's actually very much going to continue beyond MAID. And it doesn't require MAID to incentivize it. It really is something that as the businesses grow, they're able to do this and provide services that are also providing them with more income.
Thank you. We've got 5 or 6 minutes left, and I don't know where to take this conversation because I've got quite a few interests in myself. So, but let me indulge me with one last difficult question, really. I suppose when you start talking about this, the processes of change that are happening in these agricultural systems, in these agribusiness systems, it's easy, I imagine, for your staff and perhaps for you to get very identified with your partners and their interests and their profits and so on, and the number of farmers they're reaching as customers and so on. This can easily kind of take over. I'm just wondering, did the program kind of formally also try to think about or address either these sort of environmental risks that you mentioned of over-intensification of agriculture or the use of pesticides becoming more widespread, or perhaps other kinds of externalities like maybe changes in social dynamics and social gender relationships as a result of this change in the agribusiness kind of environment? So I'm just curious how the program set out, or whether it set out to try and track that, think about that, or do any sort of formal risk assessments.
I think, this is it's a good question, Mike, and it's very challenging for a program to often resource all the sort of things that spill out like that you would like to, but a client isn't necessarily, encouraging you to do or making the resources available. And so, the social side of it and the effects of, for example, the kind of intra-household effects of this change in agricultural labor patterns and in terms of revenue and so on, is simply beyond the scope of what we could really investigate. And we had in this program, we had a independent verification unit that was tasked with looking at some of these issues, but in the end, resources ran dry for that. So there are a lot of you can always have a lot of extra things that you would like to be able to look at and cover, and both on a kind of, if you like, a risk mitigation basis, but also on a kind of positive side too, and seeing where you can go. And this is really quite a small program with limited resources stretched over 7 years. And there was so much more we would have liked to be able to do that we just didn't have the resources to do.
And we actually did capture this. So we did a lot of in the second phase of the program. We sat down with the team and said, okay, there's a lot that we can't do. What can we get out there? What's the messaging that we can get out there for the future implementers in Northern Ghana, right? For the future implementers of market systems, but also for our agribusinesses. So that's what we did. We created business cases for environment, for private sector-led agribusiness, for gender and social inclusion. And these resources live beyond MAID. They're available on our website. We talk about the failures, the opportunities, the gaps, And we also give some ideas. So the internship scheme, something that we piloted under MADE, you guys can take this forward. We set out exactly how we did it, what was our costing structure, how to replicate it. So there's already a blueprint that other market system development practitioners can take on and learn from it. We want to be transparent. We specifically wanted to keep this and leave it available for all future users.
Thank you very much, Camilla. Thank you very much, Mark. It's been really interesting. Thank you for everyone who put questions in. If you didn't get your questions answered, I'm sorry. But like I said, please do follow up with Mark or Camilla and give us your feedback. And come next time we have a webinar.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks to everyone for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
All the best.